Yo, yo, yo. Start getting the hair crazy and start picking it all crazy. Stuff be getting all on you. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a moment to see who jumps in here real quick. I don't have a lot of time, so get these ideas off my chest, and then I'm gonna head in and do some photos. So let's see who they notify and who pops in. Still checking out the invisible rainbow here. Still polishing this off. Excellent try, Fist of the North Star. What's up? What's up? I got about a half hour to I know, right? Y'all get notifications because I think this is what y'all commonly search for. So what's XNA? That's what we're gonna talk about for a little bit. I got 30 minutes. Anybody who was in KT's Blood Wars live stream recently already know what XNA stands for. And I'm just gonna tap it a little bit before I get in here because it's I'm in front of a school right now, so I have um some basketball photos to take and then some hockey later on. So the rest of the day is already shot. So I figured I'd squeeze in a gap of information real quick. Um, and since you guys are here, Doug's in the building. There we go. So I'll wait one more minute and then I'll dive right in for a little bit. Then I'll jump out of here. I got at most a half hour, so I won't be on here as long as I normally do. But that's okay because I'm just shooting this information out there real quick. And as time goes on, I'm gonna detail it a lot more. I already looked into it quite a bit, so I can actually talk extensively about it, but not fully the way I want to, but enough for you to kind of get it. All right. So, all right, we got a few people in the building. So what I'll do is I'll go in. So jumping right in, what this XNA stands for? It stands for xenonucleic acid. And yes, that's what it sounds like because back in the day with foods, especially when it came to women having PCOS, polycystic ovarian system, um, polycystic ovarian syndrome, not system. Um, that book seems like it. Yeah, you gotta. Well, maybe I'm not very far into it, as you can see where the tab is. I'm not very far into it. It's a lot. What it is I go through each page slow because this is one of those books I won't have a lot of time to read twice. So I make sure I lock into very important key points that they have. The good thing is it's not a big statistics book. It's more of a big history book. So they name a lot of names and give a lot of details instead of having a lot of charts and information. So that's the good thing about it. Yep. So yeah, getting right into it. ZNA, xenonucleic acids. And like I was going to say, back in the day, shoot, at least now within 15 years, we've been talking about with xenoestrogens, which causes, or at least it's a part of the reason for women having polycystic ovarian syndrome, where women have cysts on their ovaries and stuff like that, from these xenochemicals, these xenoestrogens, which mainly come from, hair products and makeup and things that are in foods and things like that. So they mimic estrogen. And because it's artificial, I've explained to you guys a lot in the past couple of live streams about the issues with shapes of things. So there's a reason every time something in something changes, like, okay, if we have a blue color, okay, we got natural blue. If we have a green color, okay, we have natural green. We mix the two together, we have a purplish color. So the moment we mix two things together, the shape changes, which means the function will change. So we need to understand that word xeno is very important. So xeno is the word we use for synthetic. So when we say xenonucleic acids, we're talking about synthetic nucleic acids. Now, how new is the information? Well, again, I always say this a lot, and I know I always say that I always say, right? But um, I'd always said, especially in my lectures that I've done, the live lectures that I've done, that I think a lot of information came to a culmination in the 1950s. And a part of that was what they call the discovery of DNA, RNA. But then there was also this thing called ZNA. Now, ZNA being xenobiotic or xenonucleic acids, we know that DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid and RNA is ribonucleic acid. And the deoxyribose and the oxy and the standard ribose are sugars. So we got phosphates, we got sugars. We're talking about the backbone of how DNA is made and created. So what separates ZNA from DNA and RNA? It's the sugars. It's not necessarily the cytosine, the what is it, CTG, cytosine, guanine, I think it's that. No, it's not thymine, is it? Uracil, and there's a fifth one, and for some reason it's like, but you got the four base pairs, or the four bases, nucleic bases, that make up base pairs that causes what you would say is, because when we talk about DNA and RNA, we're talking about the library that's pulled from for your body to be able to act in specific circumstances, right? What makes life tick? It's the big library of time and what came before you genetically, right? So that's what that's all about. So why do doctors get into this thing? So xenobiology, which is the area of study of xenobiotics, xenobiology, and XNAs, what they figure is that in human evolution, and remember, you have to go back and do your research and define evolution for yourself, because then you have Darwin's theory of evolution, and then you have evolution itself. So it can be looked at different ways, because remember, it's a theory of evolution. So some people will build their base of science off of a theory of evolution, and then there's actual evolution. So you got to get into that whole thing, right? But just rock with it for what it is, what I'm saying here. So in standard evolution, they're talking about probability that things come together to create things. And what they're saying is, even though we know about RNA and we know about DNA, there's a possibility that RNA and DNA are just what so happen to have come together to create the possibility of the biological life that we have, with its possibilities and constraints, right? So obviously, you drive one car, it's capable of this. You drive another car, it's capable of these things. So because this car has that, it can do this. And because that car has that, it can do that, right? We're talking about that kind of scenario. Would you say, is that in the same category as xenoestrogens? Yes, because it's considered xenobiology, so synthetic versions of biology. And what it is XNA is considered an analog of DNA. And when we say analog, it's pretty much saying that it's a synonym, it can be substituted for a thing, which is the direction that they're going in. So xenonucleic acids all right, let's get this part out the way. As it stands from the research I've seen, you don't get it in your mind quite yet that they're going to sneak these XNAs into your body, because right now there's no human implications to it yet, because they said a part of biosafety and bioethics is that here. All right, so we got to settle this first. The first thing about XNA is they found out that it can be placed inside the body, and the body has no way of reacting to it. So it's neutral ground. If we put XNA in the body alongside DNA and RNA have polymerases, poly meaning many, merases meaning like a type of enzyme, has many different enzymes. So a polymerase creates multiple actions. And when a DNA and RNA are trying to do something, it can be decoded using polymerases to make things happen in the body. Well, if you throw an XNA in the circle, the body has nothing to react to it. So it just sits there. And what they said is, because the XNA has the ability to commit actions on the DNA and RNA, because it can act as what we call a ribozyme, which ribose what do we call it? Ribozyme would be a ribose-based enzyme, and enzymes are a type of protein. Remember, the proteins are shapes that perform actions, right? And an enzyme is a shape that performs an action. It's a catalyst to make things come together and form something new, or to break things apart, right? Speed things up, slow things down, build things up, tear things down. They're part of the working mechanisms to do that, right? So XNA has the ability to become a type of enzyme also. So not only is it something that can present information into the system, it can actually make actions happen to build things up, tear things down within the system concerning the DNA RNA chain. So that's the big deal about that. So if XNAs can not be acted on by human life, like if we throw it in the human body and the human body cannot act on it and it can just sit there, but it has capabilities to act on the human body, it can be used as some sort of biological shield. Let me give you an example. Um, if you can code an XNA to not allow changes, like this is literally something I read. The XNA can make it so that your human body does not react to things that happen in the environment. So y'all know how we talked about horizontal gene transfer in the past. Vertical gene transfer is when you have a baby, your genetics pass to the baby. Horizontal gene transfer is when any type of genetic information within the environment interacts with you and causes changes within your DNA and RNA so you can survive within the environment. So either way, it's environmentally based. So now that we know how that happens, XNA has the ability to like step in front of DNA and RNA so that when actions happen to the body, it doesn't integrate or affect it. But so now that I put that out there, what I was going to explain earlier is because that's true, they said because of how evolution, they believe evolution might have worked, how things kind of bump and somehow coincidentally come together and start working. They're trying to say that they can't push forward with using XNAs in human systems because of biosafety, bioethics, which could include if we put it in there, we don't know what the implications are if somehow it starts to unify and take form to the point where it works in the human body. And remember, if form denotes function, meaning shape determines how a thing moves, we know DNA and RNA run us. So if an XNA comes in there, and it doesn't have ribose and deoxyribose as the backbone. Remember, we got DNA, RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, RNA, ribonucleic acid. We know we got those. So XNA comes in, and its backbone is not ribose and deoxyribose sugars. It's other stuff like I think threose and cyclohexose. They got these different names for it. So because the sugar backbone is different, if form denotes function, we change the sugar, we change the shape, we change function. So they don't know what they'll get. But the positive side, for all my fantasy heads there, Marvel heads and comic book heads, Street Fighter and all that stuff like that, the fantasy stuff, the body might be able to do. So apparently XNAs carry 6 nucleic bases. Now try to do a quick search to see what the final 2 mean, and they're P and Z. So they already have the the ATCG, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and then you got the uracil, which is the 5, because we know that one can exchange for uracil when it's RNA. But with the XNA, there's the 4 base sugars, and then there's 2 more extras, which means now when you combine pairs together, you have far more possibilities, and you can program the possibilities. So let's say you want to implement a code into the human DNA where it builds leather skin but still has the human look. For all my video game players, if you ever played any of the Oblivion, Skyrim, the Elder Scroll series, you see all the different people. They got like walking lizards and walking cats. They're humans. They're upright and they're walking, but they got tails and they got the fur of a cat and all that. I'm being a little fantastic about it, but what I'm basically saying is that if you can have more base pairs, you can have more possibilities of what you can make the human being do. But because it's called XNA, it would be a synthetic type of thing. It won't do what's naturally already happening. It will be based on the laws of what actually happened, except we're kind of finagling within it. Because they said if you're going to take on this kind of challenge, you need to know what DNA and RNA can do and what the restrictions are. You need to find out if you're going to maneuver something else into the mix, that the baseline of how things work in the universe stay the same. So you don't want to mess with that. So if you got DNA, it turns into RNA. So you got that DNA twisting ladder. You splice the ladder in half. You lay it down. You got RNA. You got these base pairs, which is when the building blocks of RNA are kind of paired up. That ATCG. They pair up in 2s, and then we have a certain amount of them. You have like a nucleic base. And then when you build that strain up even more, and then you get into stuff like 5', 3'. If I keep rubbing my nose off, it's because the hair right here grew so long, it's like tickling my nose when I talk. It's annoying as hell. But yeah, so you get these different base pairs. So you get this breakdown from DNA, RNA, and then you get mRNA, which is the message. After you transcribe it, which is tRNA, and then that mRNA moves out of the vault, so to speak, into the cytosol, which is the watery part of the cell, where all the machinery to build proteins comes from. So ZNA can run that whole gamut. So it's possible of doing that. But right now, you dump XNA into a body and it doesn't do anything. So it doesn't do anything. So they're trying to find out how they can use that shielding mechanism of XNA to help biological systems that use DNA and RNA. So since DNA and RNA can't act on XNA being in the body, but XNA can actually act on processes within the body, something can happen like, let's say there's a virus floating around the atmosphere and it tries to come in and latch into the body's RNA or DNA. ZNAs can be the shield standing in the way that keep a reaction from actually happening. So it has implications to not reacting to the environment. But my skepticism sense went off, which means naturally your body would lose the ability to grow if that shield is just up there and it's not moved. So kind of what you are genetically when you have a child, it will pass down exactly where it is. Once that XNA gets entered, where you don't react to the environment anymore, that's the standing point of your body's genetic library, basically. That's what that sounded like. So when you guys go search to see if you see the same thing. And I know in KT's live stream, he brought it up and he was showing a Wikipedia data about it. I looked at that, but I actually went and looked up the history, like knowing that DNA, RNA, XNA was discovered around in 1953. Finding out about ribozymes and the fact that it was made up of 6 base pairs instead of the standard 4 to 5 that we have with DNA and RNA. And so I did a little bit more research on it so I could bring you guys some light detail in this little bit of time that I have. So that's what you need to know. So I don't want anybody thinking that right now, unless they're sneaking it, right, that there's XNAs floating around being thrown into your body that they're going to try and use and manage and stuff. Right now, as far as I know, it's an area of interest. But I got to admit, if they discovered it in 1953, it's 2022 now. A lot more could be going on behind the scenes, and I wouldn't be surprised. So there could literally be, maybe they could be plopping these XNAs up in drones and droids. And because remember, if there's a synthetic form of things, if it works exactly the same, but the shape is different, then you can build a synthetic organism and utilize these things. But you got to be careful with that, because if you create a fully capable biological machine, it will operate like a human, but with more capabilities. So you're talking, you ask me, it's like Marvel and Terminator mixed. So, it sounds like the implications of it. And y'all know I might throw out fantastical ideas, but I only throw them out when the knowledge, they don't have to say that something happened. The baseline of a thing tells me what's possible. And that's, so saying what's possible, it's an opinion. There's no proof. There's no backing behind it. But no different than I say, if 2 magnets can have an issue floating on top of each other or snapping together, that's implications that a car can fly. You just learn how to control the magnetic field, which later on, after I said that, I found out was electronics and the right-hand rule. Direction, electricity, magnetism, right angles to each other, that kind of thing. Okay. Let's see what y'all saying. So I got 10 minutes to kind of float and talk some stuff before I got to get into the school. What you got? What's going on? I see y'all in the building. Risto in the building. Google me. Moon Rocker, Philly Dog, OG. George Macon came in here. RTP. I saw Excellent Triarity in the building. Mike Carter. Keystone 291. Tag Live. Fist of the North Star. I saw you in there. Yeah, you could say this is a part of the transhumanism movement. Y'all gotta admit though, XNA is really it's a hard dive away from the natural world. I always hope that when they create these things, I always tend to have a positive look at it too, because I have a bit of a fantasy mind. So me and a friend talk about this stuff all the time when we're not talking about video games and B-boy. We're talking about is human biology capable of what we see in movies sometimes? Can a human master the electricity that it can endure so much? Now, mind you, we're magnetic and electric beings, which means that those are atmospheric controlling mechanisms, because electricity controls the power, magnetism controls the so it's kind of like electricity, energy, magnetism controls strength, so to speak, right? If I can jump, when I first learned to jump, my feet land kind of hard, like down onto the ground. But when I strengthen myself enough, eventually I train my body where I develop muscles and tendons and ligaments to be able to handle a stronger electric charge. So now when I jump, I I land softer because I'm stronger. And when you're stronger, it just means that, because remember, when gravity pushes down, that's an electromagnetic force. So it forces things to move in a certain direction, like magnets do. Magnets kind of, or they repel. Gravity, which is a gravitational field, is nothing more than a phenomenon of electromagnetism. So what happens is when they say in the beginning was the word, it's kind of like if there's this big glob of black plasma and there's nothing, the moment the first sound, so to speak, happens, there's this explosion within that plasma. And that explosion outwards is what we call space. And the explosion outwards happens in a toroidal spiraling nature. And y'all recognize that as the golden ratio, the rate at which things grow in the universe. You look at my finger, that first line, using the golden ratio, it unfolds to this line. And from this line, all this up here, it unfolds into here to here. And then from here to the whole arm. So the rate at which things unfold, and they unfold in a spiraling pattern. So this is where we start connecting a lot of dots, right? So things spiral out, creating space, and then they create the opposite, the inverted effect, which would be the magnifying glass. So if you have a toroid, a donut shape, the hole in the middle of it is the inverse shape of it, which is the hourglass shape. So as things explode and spin and explode out, they also wrap back in and they do the opposite, right? So they have a way of speaking it, but I don't remember it right now, so we won't do that. If I'm to gauge a bit, how powerful can a human really become? I don't even have enough information to say that. The only limit I could say we have is we have to find out, whether it be through the alien theory or some other theory, um, how is it at the same time we could talk about what humans are capable of, but we seem to all agree there are dormant things in the body. Like look up the back when Inky a long time ago was talking about maghemite and maghitite, I think it was the magnet, the iron types that was in our body that allowed us to pick up the magnetic fields of the world to understand why birds fly south, that kind of thing. We had that in there, and I think there was a term for that. But there's certain things that sounded like superhuman that our bodies were capable of, and when I looked them up, the word vestigial popped up, which means they once were, and science agrees. So it's almost like we either have, they like to call it junk DNA. We either have DNA that is locked, that we don't know how to tap into, or someone locked it in the past. And usually people put that locked it in the past in the alien theory kind of thing. Like humans were capable of this, but this person came in and did this to us as humans and locked that off. I don't know if that part's true. I got to leave room for everything, so you're not surprised by anything. Everything is like, some things we can actually perform work on because we can prove them, and some things are fantastical ideas that they sound good as a story, like details connect, but nothing to use in real world circumstances. So I try and keep those two separate. There's some things where we just discuss it for entertainment until something actually connects it and makes it exist. And then some things we discuss because that shit exists and the capabilities of it are definitely possible. So when I'm talking about the XNA, I'm talking about that shit exists and the possibilities are currently there. You just have to be careful because, like we said, if we now unlock another base, another nucleic base that can create more base pairs, that means more possibilities of the human body. And if you place that into the wrong person or the wrong thing, and somehow XNA all of a sudden can be polymerases, which are enzymes in your body that decode them and make things happen in the body based on the environment. If that suddenly starts happening out of nowhere, we don't know what the implications of that are. I mean, what happens if you all of a sudden become like Godzilla, where you absorb so much radiation, you have to radiate it back out. And then you just destroy everything around you. Like I said, these sound fantastical, but I'm being extreme to administer the point to you that I'm trying to make. So yeah, these things they call junk DNA and all that stuff like that, these are the X factors. These are the things that you are uncertain whether they can happen or not. And it's exciting. And for some people, it can also be scary. Like to me, you learn enough, you dream enough. The word scary is kind of fleeting. Like for things to actually be scary, they have to now when you reach a certain level of consciousness, certain things have to actually exist in front of you for you to have any emotional reaction to it. So with knowledge, it's, when you first learn knowledge, you can be excited, mad, all these different emotions. But when you take the time to investigate it through meditation, through dreaming, through talking, you eventually embody the experience of it, although through the dreamlike state, um, that embodiment of the information helps you come to a calmness and a peace about said information. So if something sounds scary or sounds great, you don't have but so much of a reaction to it once you've kind of digested the information long enough. And meaning including like having some form of experience, whether it be physical, dream like state, meditation state, whatever, right? Yeah, once we found out everything was electromagnetic, all we have to do, remember, we use the standard principles. If someone says I am an electric being, I now have to consider my body capable of things electricity is capable of. If they tell me that I'm magnetic, I have to assume that my body's capable of things that magnetics are capable of. Now, how does the shapes work out? That's where quantum entanglement comes in, and that's where things get complicated. You can affect things, which affect things in the universe, but you're not actually allowed to infringe on someone else's what's the term I want to use? Like, like each human being has a choice, and you're really not supposed to infringe on that. Like two bodies can't occupy the same space at once, kind of thing. So yes, you can like go punch somebody and make them feel pain, but at the same time, there's a side of like infringement that natural law will not allow to happen, but there's another side where things affect things. So you like for instance, a Christian sees someone commit murder, and they keep saying God going to get them. They're not going to get away with them. Karma's going to catch up and stuff like that. But what they don't understand is a universal principle says that all are hurt or all gain favor from these things happening. So what if you kill somebody who was creating the cure for cancer? The implications of that are time, number one, because the person who would have created is now dead. So you got to wait for somebody else to pick up and continue. The impact that person would have had on other people's lives had they still been around. And what happens if, like I said, if it was a cure that was supposed to be there, then until someone picks that up and learns it and puts it out there, the time distance between that and the person picking it up and making it happen, more people die. So although they say God's going to get them karma and stuff like that, we all suffer that. Because when you see the person die, that's the emotional trauma. The person who killed them is going to have some form of trauma going with that. But they have a stress where it's like, I'm trying not to get caught or found out. I don't want to have to reap any consequences to what I've done. But then the person who saw the person get killed, they have that stress. They have that feeling. And while they're busy trying to say that person gonna get theirs, you're already getting yours. So it's a universal effect, which is why as a people, we have to learn to unify, because whether or not that person gets punished or not, from that day forward, the person who was killed no longer exists. So the implications of that is for generations to come. Because what would have happened, what would have caused something to happen in the future will no longer happen. So we all, one way or another, indirectly and directly, have to deal with these problems that happen in the universe. So that's why we have to treat each other a certain way, love each other, and understand what we're doing to one another when we make decisions, because there's long-term implications outside of just the person who caused it is going to get theirs. We're getting ours every time someone gets killed, every time somebody makes a bad decision, every time somebody takes someone's freedom away, every time somebody gets raped, beaten up, even if people are loved, have sex, create a certain child under certain conditions. There's implications universally with that. So there is no just them. It's just them, just you, and everybody. There's some effect somewhere reaching across the eons of space. Because remember, in consciousness, when we talk about consciousness, thoughts, words, reactions, those are electromagnetic things, which means they're connected to the entire field of life. All is mind. Everything is connected. So when you speak, say, think, affect someone else or they affect you, everyone's causing that reaction, that vibration to go out to the field and return at some point again. Because it always reaches the ends of the universe, returns come back again. Remember I said in the beginning, when I was talking about how things are manifested. There's that great ball of gas, right? That great ball of plasma, that perfect gas. Nothing exists, but within that ball of gas, that black plasma, everything is potential to exist and to happen. So when the what we would call this, I don't know, the Big Bang, the first sound, whatever you want to call it, the first word, when that happened, that gas explodes outward. And when it explodes outward, it creates space, which means potential is becoming manifestation. It constantly does this heart beating thing. As long as there's a sound and an action, more of those explosions and spiraling outs happen and more contraction tries to happen. So the universe, that's why they say it's ever expanding. And then in certain cases, it tries to contract. But as long as there's action and motion and sound and vibration, it constantly keeps expanding. And as things expand, certain things contract. Eventually, the time of that thing collapses enough where some things die and pass away and new things are born. So there's constant exchange of energy constantly going on. So the universe is eternal for these reasons. Of course, I'm just giving my perspective from all the information that I have learned. Double slit experiment proves the observer collapses the wave function and creates this reality according to quantum physics. I had a discussion with somebody. I probably can't do it here. What I would need is, let me see. I would need like multiple forms of string, different colors to show you guys. But collapsing waves of possibility. Now remember, nothing is created or destroyed. The embodiment, the thing that allows manifestation to happen is the all, the thing we call God. Some people try and assign God human characteristics and things like that, but it's not like that. You have to assume if something is ever present, omnipotent, omniscient, and everywhere at the same time, then if you are a piece out of that thing, this is why I agree with Phil Valentine when Phil Valentine said it's negation. If you are the all, the everything, then in order for other things to be so-called created, you have to pull from yourself. If you are the all, the everything, the embodiment of potential, meaning something doesn't exist until you collapse the possibility down small enough to make it a solid object. That is what the embodiment of a godly being is. So if God is the potential for everything and you're plucked out of the waters that we call God, which means you're a smaller piece of the same, then that means you have the ability to collapse waves of possibility just in a more smaller sense. So if I have this strand here and a bunch of strings, different colors lined up together, you have the ability to stare at one of the strands long enough where your focus in it gets greater. And it's almost like all the other strands fall away and you focus in on one thing. And that position applies to everything in life. It applies to your career. They tell you to focus on the thing that you're good at, focus on it and put everything you got into it. That's the same as when there's a ball of string of possibilities of things you can do. You focus on one and eventually you start to zoom into one string so much that that string becomes the biggest thing there, which means all of the waves and possibilities that were out there, you collapsed it into one possibility. So as you got closer to it, there were other strings and strands around. And if you switch your focus to it, the quality of the one you're focusing on goes down. So your dream might be to become a millionaire, right? And you focus so much on becoming a millionaire, you collapse the possibility wave so much it becomes one strand. And that's your true fate. But if you're over here looking at that and you're changing your focus, you're lukewarm, as the Bible would say, right? You're focused on so many things, you never collapse the strand into one. You got all these other ones mixed up in there. So even though you've been looking at the one, the other ones around it got mixed in. So the quality of what you were looking for, you didn't become a millionaire, you made a couple thousand because you didn't completely focus. You focused, you started zooming in, but then you got a little closer and you start noticing the other stuff around it. You have to keep focusing your attention in on one thing. That's why they say meditate on these things daily, day and night. Do this, focus on that, move your feet, do all of those things, and make sure it focuses on one specific thing. The universe will always bring you what you're looking for. Because with all those strings and strands out there, let's say you want to become a vegan. In the beginning, the strings and strands, all the meat eaters, the alcohol drinkers, the smokers, everything around you that you have focused on since you grew up because of your environment telling you to do it. Your environment says, eat this, do that, act this way, go here, do that. You got all these strings and strands around. But now you want to become vegan. The strings and strands are everywhere. And everywhere you turn trying to become vegan, you find yourself staring at the thing you used to do. Until you focus, you're like, with all the noise around me, this is what I want to become. And you start staring at it long enough, you start zooming in. And as you zoom in, the other strands around it start to fall out of the frame. and you get closer and closer to the thing you want. And as you do that, the strands behind the one you're focusing on start to become other things attached to it. So I want to be vegan, and the first thing I notice is I just want to get rid of soda. The meat and stuff is still here. I just want to get rid of soda. And you zoom in to that strand, and all of a sudden, soda's out the frame. You're no longer worried about soda. It's not even a bother anymore. When it's around, you're like, I just want juice. I don't want no damn soda. Then eventually do that same thing for pork and chicken and turkey and all that, till eventually the only thing left is vegan. And then you see these other strings behind vegan, which is other people who cook vegan food, people who make vegan. All of a sudden, when a vegan commercial comes on, you notice it. It's been people around you your whole life who have been vegan, talking about vegan food, telling you healthy things. You didn't notice it. You didn't even care. You didn't focus on it. You looked at the stuff you were supposed to focus on. But now, because you've been focusing on this one strand in the direction you want to go in, somehow you suddenly notice other things. And when you notice them, you walk towards them. And when you walk towards them, guess what's around them? Other things just like it. So you start off by saying, I'm going to get healthier. I stop eating this. I stop eating that. I'm going to go to the gym and get healthy. Other people in the gym may be trying to get healthy. Some meat eaters, some vegans. But one way or another, you just found yourself around more vegans. And then you start hearing vegans talk about stuff versus the meat eaters. You know what they're talking about. But the vegan, the thing you want to become, your ear is tuned to it more. You're conscious of it. Conscious don't mean you're the embodiment, you're acting it out. It means that you have the knowledge to pay attention to it. You're consciously looking at the world to get where you need to go. And that's the first step to being awakened. You're awakened to the fact that you realize it's something you must do. So you start focusing on things, and other things around it get closer to you. First, I was talking about getting rid of food. I did. It made me go to the gym. Being in the gym put me around more people who were trying to do what I was trying to do. I start talking to them. I learn new information. I start shopping at different places. Different places that I shop at have more vegans in it. You see what I mean? It's collapsing the wave of possibilities to become the thing you want to become. And anything you do that for is always true, but it takes time. When you get really good at it, which is the part that we're trying to see if people have kind of figured out yet when they talk that fourth dimension, fifth dimension. Fourth dimension means you've mastered the time element. Fifth dimension means you've mastered the I guess you could say the local universal level. Because all you get in sixth, seventh, eighth dimension, if y'all look up the dimensions, is you get the same thing you got from first dimension to like fifth, but you're just now stretching it across the universe. So if you mastered four dimensions, then when you get to eighth dimension, you've mastered time in another galaxy, so to speak. So it becomes the same thing, but just in further places within the universe. So that's kind of how that is, right? Uh, Man, y'all hitting it up in here. Human flight should be the closest to reach since levitation exists. Yeah, because we're electromagnetic. Now, I like jumping, and that's where I kind of learned the principle. When I'm jumping on, like, you guys see me. If you're on Instagram and you look at one of my videos on there, the story Johns, the ones you can lock and keep there. The very first one on the left on my Marvin Health and Arts, the same as y'all see on the screen on my Instagram, you'll see me jump up on 54-inch. They got like these pads in the gym, and I jumped on top of it, and it's 54 inches high. And when I first tried to do it, man, I would like get to my feet would touch the edge and I would fall back down because I had a decent jump, but that was like that joint comes to my shoulder. So it's a serious jump. But when I jumped up on it, it's like I would land it. And when I first landed, it was a hard landing. If you see me jump on there now, I can land it and use my toes and be quiet and slowly come down because any impact has a vibration, and vibration on human body, being that we have piezoelectric material and crystal in us, causes electricity discharge within our body. Piezoelectric, piezochromatic, different piezo effects. So when we cause that reaction to happen, it causes electricity based on how much impact happens to dissipate across our body. If our crystal structure is dense enough in our bone, blood, stuff like that, then it has a place. Because remember, when you're stronger, your body can handle a bigger charge. So maybe the weakest person can take a 25-volt battery. You could take 100-volt, which means if you get hit with 100 volts worth of power and your body runs off of that much power, it'll dissipate across your body and nothing will break or burn up because your body can handle it. It has enough crystalline structure and muscle to do it. But a person who can't, then when that electricity comes through, it's going to shoot through fast and burn out a lot of things. And whenever you hear a loud clap, that's a break, because with vibration could come sound and light depending on how strong it is. So when you see light, that's the electricity shooting through the system. If the electricity becomes great, you start to feel that pain, like, oh yeah, that joint, man, that was a high jump. But when you jump from a very high location and you land, you generate so much force and electricity that you hear a sound, and that sound is the electricity escaping very fast, and that's a break. Because when it can't dissipate fast, because remember, when that electricity hits, it's a certain speed, it's going to boom out, just like I said about the universe, right? When the sound was made and the universe spiraled into creation, when you create that impact, that electricity going to explode outward very fast. If it's moving faster than your body can handle it, it's going to escape as fast as it needs to. And it will break open a hole to let it out into the atmosphere. And that's how you break stuff when you can't handle the electrical charge. Now imagine if I can get my toes light enough to hold my weight. And I know there was this monk who was doing his best to learn how to remember. We do this a little at a time over generations. There's this monk that was learning to run over these little thin platforms over water. And he finally got it. This was years ago now, but he was trying to use the strength of his footing and speed to run across these thin platforms. And if you didn't have enough, you couldn't absorb enough charge in your foot and run that joint, the first platform you walk on, you were going to collapse directly into the water in that platform. So it shows you how much electromagnetism and strength he built up in his body to be able to get across that threshold. So eventually, if somehow you're able to generate enough charge force within your body to put out an electromagnetic field, then obviously it starts to, just like jumping, it goes from a hard drop to a float, and then from a float to a fly. So it's got to be somewhere in the mix, even if we don't see it yet. Like we know birds flapping wings is an electromagnetic force against the oxygen, nitrogen, whatever's in the air. They're generating a force. And because they're lighter and the material they use are lighter, obviously the force generation makes it easier for them to fly. They're not a dense human being like we are without feathers and stuff like that. So remember, the feathers and the wings they create an electromagnetic force that allows the birds to fly like they do. And that's the science behind it. So we got to find a way to bridge that gap. But in the case of this XNA we talking about, they could be creating a situation where it's like, we'll open the door and latch this into the system so that the body's base pairs can perhaps create biological organism that has the ability to move its magnetic field around. Think about it. If you're electromagnetic and you can move the field towards your upper extremities, then you can force flight. You're talking like M. Bison type stuff. Like I said, this is fantastical, but what I predict in the future is based on base knowledge about an item. If we're electromagnetic, magnets can snap together or fly apart. And even though people at first didn't know how to control that magnetism, now they know with the right-hand rule and using electricity, they can control the amount of force, thereby controlling the amount of speed at which the magnets will snap together or repel apart. So if they can control the speed, they can eventually equalize the frequency of speed and cause it to float and then reverse course, which means it goes from equaling, which is you floating, to reversing course, which is you flying. And that's just controlling the electromagnetism. Okay. If only we could master the double jump, you know what I mean? Nintendo video game type style. Guys, I didn't have a lot of time here. It's 3:14. I have to go and get into the school. Thank you guys for coming out. Rambling a little bit. I like to ramble. I got a lot more stuff I would have wanted to say, but I can't because I got to get into the school right now. So I'm gonna put these Jordans on and get the hell up in this school and do this photography, and then I got some hockey later on. So I will catch you guys a little bit later, and we'll keep chopping away at this thing because XNA is not the only new thing. There's some other stuff that we'll talk about in the future too when I get enough info for it. So no problem, RY. Zai the Great, see you in the building. Black Voltron, as always. I will get at you guys in a little bit. Thanks for coming through. Love y'all.